So we'll get underway. We'll see how this goes today. Okay, so today we have two units we're going to be trying to look at in terms of the 7-part model, familial and hierarchical. So remember your team mind map is due. I think that's been turned in. Okay, so brief summary from last week's material. So this is the framework we're working from, is that there are these built-in structures. We use visual metaphors, and you'll begin to see that today, I hope. This is complicated stuff. It should make sense, prefrontal cortex, so I think that all makes sense. And these are the 7. So we'll try and get these 2 today. We should. These 2 will be then next week, the week after, and then 2 weeks on that one. So we'll see where we go to. Okay. So starting off, the communal familial. This is what I call the foundational relational analysis. There's a reason for calling it foundational. In many respects, it is not the simplest, but it's kind of the most basic. It's the one we all know, everyone uses, you can see it in the world around you. Some of the others, much harder to see. This one is simple, clear, relatively easy to use. It's something you're born with. That is, you have this kind of relational analysis from birth. It's organic, it's very clearly wired in. We can see it in newborns, so that they have this strong sense of identity, in their case, with their mothers. In fact, they can't draw the distinction. And that's really significant to this mindset. That is, there is no real distinction between members within the circle. So, we have that moral, emotional feeling of unity, intimacy, being together. The question is, how are we processing it? It's clear there's a mathematics involved in the brain. What exactly is that mathematics? Two different arguments. One is algebraic. I use geometry. As I said last week, I think I can use 2-dimensional geometry. It might actually be 3-dimensional geometry. That is, I'm going to use a circle. It might actually be a sphere. That is the way our brains process things. They're very oriented to 3 dimensions, but we're very used to also working in 2 dimensions as well, so I'm not too worried about it. So the circle is the simplest basic visual structure. That is, it's a space without differentiation and a uniform boundary. Is it an absolute perfect circle? The answer is your mind doesn't draw perfect anything. It's a relative circle. That is, you can't tell. It might be kind of irregular in some respects, but as soon as you think irregularity, then you're beginning to think in terms of comparison to outside components, and now you're breaking with the sense of the circle itself. That is, as a metaphor, it is a circle. It has a very simple form of relational analysis, which is, are you in or are you out? Are you in the circle or are you out of the circle? And if you're out of the circle, you are one type of being. If you're inside the circle, you're a different type of being, a being that shares unity with you. It's something we have immediate apprehension, strong intuition around this. That is, it doesn't take much to decide whether or not somebody is in or out. Are they part of the group or not part of the group? Part of the family, not part of the family. Part of the whatever, club, clan, or whatever, class, or not part. It's not a hard one to do. And we end up with extremely strong emotional commitments. Not because there's something about the circle that creates strong emotional commitments. It's just that that's the way our brain is wired, because when you think of where this comes from, which is infancy, all we run on are strong emotional commitments at that level. We're not thinking very well as newborns. Okay? Newborns don't have a lot of perception. They have some, but not a lot. But feeling drives them deeply, powerfully. So that's where it comes from. Here's where it goes, though. And this I find just so fascinating. The thing about the circle is its boundary condition. That is, it leads to binary reasoning. In or out is the foundation, But what does in or out mean? And we can begin to start breaking the whole world down into two. The in, with a set of characteristics, and the out, with a different set of characteristics. But characteristics that have a very close similarity within them, and extraordinary differences between them. That is, these are not gradual. They're foundationally, they're qualitative. That's absolute gap between these two. You can't be partially one and partially the other. You are either one or the other. That is, the circle does not permit gradations. Other kinds of moral reasoning permit gradations. This one does not. There's a thought out there that when it comes to human moral reasoning, we are inherently binary in the way we approach things. I don't think that's accurate. What those folk are picking up on when they're saying we are inherently binary is that there is binary reasoning that we do apply very powerfully under many kinds of circumstances. That is, you can apply this anywhere. Doesn't mean it's the only way you think. Doesn't mean we are intrinsically binary, but it's intrinsic that we have binary reasoning. And other forms of reasoning, relational reasoning. So it's complicated. But it's so powerful that there's some who think that we inherently do everything in binary terms. Not accurate, but we certainly do some important things in binary terms. So if we look at this and look at this, it's very easily, you see this is good, it's bad, very bad. Can't get any worse. And that is foundational to this perspective. This is as bad as it can get, in the sense that this is fundamentally about chaos, terror, other in its abstract alienness, garbage, genocide, impurity, the thems, the never the us's. So this is what happened. And you can continue this list. You can continue this list a long way. I just want to get this sense of what's going on that bad side. It's foundational, if you really want to look at it, is these two, chaos and terror, and the linkage they have for us as very primitive creatures. That is, not that we're sitting around here as primitive creatures, but we have a very primitive part of who we are that desperately needs safety, security, and order. We do not have that. If we are faced with chaos that doesn't provide those things, we're then linked into terror. And this is just fundamental existential terror. That is, the universe itself is frightening. And you can see that for children. You know, they can't find their mother. The universe is literally falling apart for them. Okay? They are in terror because it's chaos. It's complete, powerless chaos around them. So that's the level, that's the core of this. But it continues out metaphorically in a lot of other ways. That is, there are other things that carry those kinds of characteristics. So, other as in anything or anyone that is unknown. If you can't categorize them, can't name them, can't put them in a particular framework where you understand and know who you're relating to, they're now other. And you can just tell, you can see there's very close connection here. Other, stranger, scary, threatening, possibly. Now they could end up becoming a friend. So the otherness, chaos is not inherently evil, but it certainly carries all evil. You've got to be scared of it because there's bad stuff there. But that doesn't mean everybody out there in the other is inherently bad, but you've got to be cautious. You don't know. They could be, you know, are they going to be your next best friend or an axe murderer and you're their next victim? You don't know, and that's the problem with the other. You don't know. Garbage, the stuff that's tossed out, that always belongs on that outside. In fact, garbage on the inside of the circle is something you want immediately to push out of the circle. So it's no longer part of us. It doesn't belong to us anymore. I'll come back to that in a moment. Similar to garbage, there is impurity. Huge issue around impurity and the thems. Now, thems and genocide are connected because once we have this binary framework, we can start doing something with it, which is we can start using it to project people who are known into that otherness because we know they are not us. We may not know them well, but we know that they are other. They belong on the outside. They belong to the chaos. And now we're approaching this one. When you start looking at genocidal actions, which the planet has far too many, start looking at why people undertake that. It's because they have taken a category of people and pushed them out of the circle of humanity. That is, there's something about them that means they're no longer human enough to live. They are fundamentally, existentially out of the circle of being. They don't belong. Even if they're relatives. That is, we have this ability to take people and to attach characteristics to them that push them out. Whatever they have done or who they are or their ethno-cultural, racial background, whatever it may be, we can push them out of the circle, and then they become the targets of legitimate genocide. People don't undertake genocide because they're crazy. They undertake genocide because it makes sense, particularly in terms of maintaining purity. If you define that other as impure and therefore potentially contaminating the circle, okay, then this might be the rationalistic solution. That is, if you think about it far enough, it's actually not rational. But it appears rational. It feels emotionally right. How do you purify the circle? Getting rid of that other. Throwing out the garbage. And you see, this, and that's exactly the language that you find when people are talking about genocide and creating and setting the dynamics for genocide. As soon as people start talking about the garbage people, you know they're setting it up around this framework. And violence is a logical extension of that. Violence against those people. So it's a little bit scary. You start looking at that. The other side is very powerfully the opposite. That is, it's very much about the good things that human beings can do for each other. Generosity, belonging, giving, self-sacrifice, which is the flip side of generosity. It's about our complete commitment and giving to one another. When you start looking at altruism, you'll find that there are lots of people who argue altruism does not really exist. Certain truth to that. But if you look at it correctly, altruism genuinely exists, but it's part of a very specific relational framework that makes sense of it. That is, in a certain level, it isn't altruistic. It's simply the requirement of being part of the circle. If you are part of the circle, you owe your life to those people. You are part of the group. You are committed, you belong to them, they belong to you. They owe you their lives, and you owe them your life. It's that reciprocal altruism that goes with being part of the completely undifferentiated group that is the inner life of the circle. It doesn't draw a distinction between mother and child at that level. It does not. Complete commitment, complete sacrifice on both parts is required. I'll come back to the naming family. The logical extension, and this one frightens me terribly, is to start talking about the motherland, the fatherland, because you're taking that basic sense of circle, the sense of nurturing, the sense of being part of the family, and it's now being extrapolated into the nation as a whole, whatever that nation might be. Does a bunch of dirt qualify for these characteristics? Well, there's something about human beings. It's not a hard shift for us to make. We get attached to the soil, to the earth, and to draw it into that kind of connection. I'd love to explore that further at some point. It's an amazing connection. Oh, just talk. when I was working with First Nations, one of the points that they made to me was, you see this land where you are working. We've been here for 7,000 years. I'm trying to think. 7,000 years. What does it mean that you and your grandparents and great-great-great-great-grandparents or whatever all shared this soil? What does it mean that their bodies are buried here? What does it mean you've been eating the fruit of this land for all of that time? And I began to see why this is so powerful, because they have a sense it's not that the land belongs to them, but they belong to the land. They're so interwoven with it, so integrated with it. The land has been generous to them. The land is taking care of them. And so you begin to get this sense, yeah, the land is part of the circle at that level. But we draw from that a lot more in terms of the way nationalist ideologies pull upon that framework and make it mean something completely different. So, we're talking about altruism and, of course, the us, which means our sense of name, our sense of family. So if you ever start saying, I am, that whatever is beginning to tell you where you are drawing the lines of that circle. Because if I am something, it means there is a category, a circle, a group to which I belong, from which I take some of my identity, to which I am assuming this kind of relationship at some level. How extensively, I don't know, but at some level you're drawing upon that. And that's one of those things to watch. You know, when somebody says, well, we don't, what do you mean we? There's you and there's me. What's the we-ness? Well, the we-ness is trying to draw this circle of inclusion again. Is it appropriate? And the answer is maybe. But what are you trying to do with it? Let's watch that. Because are you setting us up to do that? If it's we, is it then therefore there's a them out there? Generally there is. If there's a we, and you want to draw upon this kind of good feeling, we the class, isn't that a good sense? We're all together. Shouldn't that be giving you good marks? Shouldn't we all be feeling good about each other? Shouldn't we all, we're just big group hug here. Well, but that's also political. It's trying to do something. It's about saying about our way we should be relating to each other. That might have a certain level of appropriateness, might not. The question really becomes, how is this being used in relationship to that? What are we trying to accomplish? And so my favorite person, of course, is Donald Trump, who, if you listen to him carefully, uses this language very, very well. Okay? If you want to know the politician in North America who I see best using this language, it's Donald Trump. He just over and over again, he hits these themes. His people are all in the circle, and America is beset by these people who are due for that. Except he doesn't use genocide. Sanctions. Sanctions really good. They're the other. They have no relationship to us. We can have sanctions against them. They're impure. They're the thems. Okay? They're people we can trade with. They're kind of on the edge of the circle. They're okay. So Canada is kind of on the edge of the circle with the United States. We're kind of part of the us. So we just had our tariffs on steel and aluminum pushed off another 30 days. Because we're kind of us. Kind of belong. We're kind of, America should be generous to us a little bit. We're kind of part of the circle. So it can be quite flexible language, but it's just to watch for is this. Because it inherently sets up a dynamic that puts people, other people here. Impurity stuff, whenever you hear the language of impurity, that is a trigger. It tells you, watch out, watch what's going on there. But impurity language is very powerful stuff and can do some very good things too. I mean, it isn't that this is inherently bad, it's just you need to watch it. Questions on that before? Okay. So it's a binary. It's about the who's outside, who's inside. Okay, so what I love about it is when we're using it at one level,